The Sudanese Army's capture of Khartoum marks the end of its 6-month offensive. CGTN's David Mbithi takes a look at the Army's key advances leading up to the retaking of the capital.
In September last year, Sudan's army launched a major campaign in Khartoum to reclaim territories held by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The RSF had controlled most of the capital since the war erupted in April of 2023. The tide began shifting in mid-January when the army announced the capture of Wad Madani, the closest major city to Khartoum and the capital of Gezira State. Residents took to the streets in celebration as army soldiers took control of the key city. Then, in late January, Sudan's army announced it had broken a record 21-month-long siege by the RSF on its headquarters in Khartoum. The RSF had shelled the headquarters heavily in the early days of fighting, but several attempts to storm the compound were repelled by army forces. The biggest gain before reclaiming Khartoum came earlier this month when the army stormed the presidential palace, taking back what was the seat of government before the war. The army-aligned government had been forced to move to Port Sudan on the Red Sea after the RSF seized control of the capital early in the conflict. Its recent wins signal a major shift in the conflict, in which the army has long been on the back foot after nearly 2 years of fighting. David Mbithi, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the RSF has maintained control in Sudan's west and south. Despite recent setbacks, it controls 4 states in the western Darfur region. For months now, it has besieged the city of El Fasher, the last army stronghold in the region. In the south, the RSF also maintains a foothold in northern and western Kordofan states. Last month, RSF leaders and their allies announced plans to form a parallel government in areas under their control. However, disputes have delayed a formal announcement of the governing structure. The move to create a parallel government has fueled fears of a partitioned country. For more on this now, we're joined by Pascal Cuttat, the Senior Advisor on Human Security at SAHAN, a think tank focused on the Horn of Africa. Thank you very much, Pascal, for joining us. What's behind the Army's recent battlefield successes after 18 months of setback?
As your colleague just reported, this is not an overnight event, and it's not something which is very sudden. It has been building up over the last few months. Part of the reason for it is logistical difficulties for the RSF, which was reduced with very lengthy supply lines over today, very long distances on one hand, and on the other hand, on very narrow roads in narrowing territory. On the other hand, the army SAF has made advances also because they have significantly been able to increase their air capacities, among others, of course, with support from outside the country. Both sides are heavily supported from outside the country, and the support to SAF has quite clearly made a difference over the last weeks and months, again, particularly with regard to the use of drones, with regard to the use of Air Force.
As the Army claims wins, the RSF officially announced a new military alliance on Wednesday. Does it mean the conflict is far from over?
One thing is clear. Historically, certain countries saw a conflict end with the fall of the capital. Saigon in 1975, more recently Damascus, or historically Constantinople. This is quite clearly not the case in Sudan. The capture of the presidential palace and ministries and government infrastructure around it, and if SAF manages the consolidation of the re-establishment of their hold over Khartoum, is clearly symbolically hugely important. It has to do with the legitimacy of a government which has been now in exile in Port Sudan. It is also administratively potentially very important. But the entire Darfur, with the exception of an army enclave in Al-Fashir, is under control of the RSF, who is stretched, yes, but there is no way that, like in other countries, the fall of the capital will immediately lead to the end of the conflict. On the contrary, the big question on everybody's mind is today, what is the next step of SAF? Are they going to have the ambition to roll on into Darfur? And if that is their ambition, is that something they can, first of all, sustain with regard to the logistics of it, with regard to their supply lines? And it would mean to launch a ground attack into the heartland of the RSF, into the heartland of its leader, Hemeti, unless they continue, as they have done in the past, carpet bombing civilian areas in cities. But that doesn't mean that they can easily take Darfur, and it also doesn't mean, unfortunately, for the millions and millions of civilians, that the war is going to end anytime soon.